Even as I opposed what I took to be the heterosexism at the core of sexual difference fundamentalism, I also drew from French post-structuralism to make my points. My work in gender trouble turned out to be one of cultural translation. Post-structuralist theory was brought to bear on U.S. theories of gender and the political predicaments of feminism. If in some of its guises, post-structuralism appears as a formalism, aloof from questions of social context and political aim, that has not been the case with its more recent American appropriations. Indeed, my point was not to apply post-structuralism to feminism, but to subject those theories to a specifically feminist reformulation. Whereas some defenders of post-structuralist formalism express dismay at the avowedly thematic orientation it receives in works such as Gender Trouble, the critiques of post-structuralism within the cultural left have expressed strong skepticism toward the claim that anything politically progressive can come of its premises. In both accounts, however, post-structuralism is considered something unified, pure, and monolithic. In recent years, however, that theory, or set of theories, has migrated into gender and sexuality studies, post-colonial and race studies. It has lost the formalism of its earlier instance and acquired a new and transplanted life in the domain of cultural theory. There are continuing debates about whether my own work, or the work of Homi Bhabha, Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak, or Slavoj Žižek belongs to cultural studies or critical theory. But perhaps such questions simply show that the strong distinction between the two enterprises has broken down. There will be theorists who claim that all belong to cultural studies, and there will be cultural studies practitioners who define themselves against all manner of theory, although not significantly Stuart Hall, one of the founders of cultural studies in Britain. But both sides of the debate sometimes miss the point that the face of theory has changed precisely through its cultural appropriations. There is a new venue for theory, necessarily impure, where it emerges in and as the very event of cultural translation. This is not the displacement of theory by historicism, nor a simple historicization of theory that exposes the contingent limits of its more generalizable claims. It is, rather, the emergence of theory at the site where cultural horizons meet, where the demand for translation is acute and its promise of success uncertain. Gender trouble is rooted in French theory, which itself is a curious American construction. Only in the United States are so many disparate theories joined together as if they formed some kind of unity. Although the book has been translated into several languages and has had an especially strong impact on discussions of gender and politics in Germany, it will emerge in France, if it finally does, much later than in other countries. I mention this to underscore that the apparent Francocentrism of the text is at a significant distance from France and from the life of theory in France. Gender Trouble tends to read together, in a syncretic vein, various French intellectuals, Lévi-Strauss, Foucault, Lacan, Kristeva, Wittig, who had few alliances with one another and whose readers in France rarely, if ever, read one another. Indeed, the intellectual promiscuity of the text marks it precisely as American and makes it foreign to a French context. So does its emphasis on the Anglo-American sociological and anthropological tradition of gender studies, which is distinct from the discourse of sexual difference derived from structuralist inquiry. If the text runs the risk of Eurocentrism in the U.S., it has threatened an Americanization of theory in France for those few French publishers who have considered it. Of course, French theory is not the only language of this text. It emerges from a long engagement with feminist theory, with the debates on the socially constructed character of gender, with psychoanalysis and feminism, with Gail Rubin's extraordinary work on gender, sexuality, and kinship, Esther Newton's groundbreaking work on drag, Monique Wittig's brilliant theoretical and fictional writings, and with gay and lesbian perspectives in the humanities. Whereas many feminists in the 1980s assumed that lesbianism meets feminism in lesbian feminism, Gender Trouble sought to refuse the notion that lesbian practice instantiates feminist theory and set up a more troubled relation between the two terms. Lesbianism in this text does not represent a return to what is most important about being a woman. It does not consecrate femininity or signal a gynocentric world. Lesbianism is not the erotic consummation of a set of political beliefs.